Hi guys and welcome to Cat Talks. Today we're going to be going through all of the books I read in April. I read 13 books and whether or not I liked them. Hope you enjoy!
So the first book I read was Circe by Madeline Miller, and this was for Ancient Runes, which is to read a retelling. Now Circe follows the life of Circe, the half-god, half-nymph, divine being that lives on an island and turns men into pigs. If you remember her from the Greek myths. She, in this story, is the main character, and we go with her through her life. There are many, many, many years of her life, like thousands upon thousand years, or at least hundreds upon hundreds, and the lovers and love interests and stories that make up her life. So we see her viewpoint of all of these Greek heroes as they come and go, and why she turns men into pigs, essentially. I was very disappointed by this book. It has had some amazing reviews on BookTube and Goodreads, and when I read it, not much happened. There wasn't much of a story, it didn't really make sense. I mean, it made sense, but it was just very slow, and the ending was very odd, and she didn't really grab hold of her destiny in any way. So I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars, and just because the writing was beautiful, and I enjoyed reading it, but I didn't really enjoy the story as a whole, if that makes sense. Subject in our assigned revision was Aerith Montse, and this is to read a work by more than one author. For this, I chose Immortan's Hwen. This is a comic book about some murders in a village in the olden days, which are blamed on a werewolf, this dude right here, and how the villagers solve that murder. I, again, didn't really like this. If I had to rate it, I'd probably give it a 2 or even a 1 star. The language used in, obviously it was Swedish, sorry, should say that first. The language used in this was very archaic, and I struggled to follow it as a non-native, but some of the words I asked my native friends, and they also were quite confused. The plot was fairly simple, and the drawing style was not very enjoyable. It's okay, book. It's okay. The next subject in our assigned revision was astronomy, with the prompt for which is to read a book with a star in the title. For this one I chose the sci-fi adult book The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. This is a book about a young woman who works as a calculator. If you've seen the film Hidden Figures, you know what that means. And she works for a calculator in the same department as her husband is lead engineer. So they're a bit of a rocket scientist, amazing duology, or at least satellites, which is their speciality. Mary Robinette Kowal does not pack her punches. Within the first chapter, a meteor crash lands on Earth, causing devastation. Huge areas of land are completely razed to the ground. Lots and lots of people die or lose everything they've ever loved. And yeah, it was a pretty harrowing read. However, I love this. The main focus of this book is on the space race. Now the meteors obviously had some effect on the weather. It's cold for a start for most of this book, very cold, but also it kind of highlights the fact that we are dependent on one planet and now people want to get off it. But this book mainly centres on the misogyny that our main character faces when she realises that she wants to be an astronaut. She is a trained pilot for the Air Force, but she's not allowed to be an astronaut because she is a woman. So this book journeys her fight to get women and coloured women involved in the astronaut screening process. Obviously there are some flaws with this book, but I loved it. It made me laugh, it made me cry, mostly it made me cry. There were several times on the bus where I was like, this is too near my own experience as a woman in science and tech. And yeah, I just love this book, 5 out of 5 stars. I'm definitely getting the next one when it comes out later this year, and I think I might even pre-order it so I can have both copies of my own rather than borrow the libraries. So the next subject I tackled was divination. Now divination's prompt was to read a book set in the future, and for this one I chose the beloved Illumina. Illumina is a book told in a mixed media format. There is pretty much no story in this whatsoever. There are only reports from various people, such as a technician watching back CCTV footage or the logs of the AI on one of the ships involved. So this is a sci-fi young adult, or possibly new adult, based on this couple, young new adult couple who are just about to graduate high school on an illegal mining planet when she breaks up with him the morning that their planet is attacked by a rival mining corporation by a rival mining corporation. Now she is a hacker with some serious skills, and he is a star team player on some kind of team that I can't really remember. It's not important to me, but he's a sports player. Sports. The main character is Katie, the girl, but we do get some moments with Ezra as well. I thought their relationship was really sweet and well told through chat logs. Yeah, they have to work together despite the fact that they broke up with each other. And the mixed media, I mean, some of it is a bit, why? why this? But then some of it is also really impactful and amazing and cool. I'm definitely picking up the next one in this series too. And yeah, this is another 5 out of 5 star read for me. So things have picked up after March's debacle. Then we had History of Magic, and for this one you had to read a book published over 10 years ago. For this I picked The Woman Warrior, which is A Childhood Among Ghosts. This is a book told from the perspective of I don't know what, is it first generation if you were born from immigrants? First generation American of Chinese descent, trying to figure out what is unique to her family, what is unique to immigrants, what is unique to China, what is unique to America. This is a non-fiction memoir, but mostly it is told through fictional stories based on the stories that her mother told her about China. I didn't enjoy this. I have later found out that it was based on that it is a university textbook, which doesn't really explain my dislike, but kind of does, if you know what I mean. But I did not like this book. I think I gave it 2 stars. It was not really worth my time reading, although I am glad I finally got it off my shelves because I've had it for a very long time. Got it at a charity bookshop, as you can clearly see here. Got it from the charity bookshop I used to work in, actually. And yeah, this was my pick for History of Magic. Then we have Muggle Studies. For this one I read Blossoms in Autumn, which I got from NetGalley as an e-arc. This is a really cute comic about 2 older people meeting, having sex, and falling in love. They do have sex, like there are boobs in this comic book, so if you are not a fan of boobs in comic books, this probably isn't one for you. I saw someone call it obscene, and I was like, it's not really obscene. It's not even really erotic. So it's not really erotica, it's just kind of a cute dish. Anyway, moving on from the boobs. It's a cute love story. I didn't think it was particularly good. I thought the art was fantastic, the art was beautiful, but there wasn't that much story. Essentially they meet and they fall in love. And then some crazy stuff happens, but they don't resolve it. That's about it. That is what this comic book is. If you're looking for a sweet, older representation book, then this is definitely one to pick up. However, I did think it was super cute, and the authors do not shy away from the issues around aging and ageism. Although again, these are not really tackled in any depth, they're just mentioned. And finally we had Transfiguration. Now the prompt for Transfiguration was to read a book with a red cover or with sprayed edges. Obviously this doesn't have a red cover, however it does have beautifully gold sprayed edges, and also it's just a cute book in general. Look, it's so tiny. And this was my pick for Transfiguration. This is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. Obviously everyone knows who Jane Austen is. She was an English woman in the 18th century. See, now I'm just questioning things. In the 19th century. Anyway, she was a young woman who used to write back in times when young women writing was not really a thing particularly, and this is a book where she pokes fun at the popular gothic novels of the time and societal figures essentially. It is a Jane Austen novel. It has sarcasm and wit and pokes fun at the fact that women can't do certain things and men can, and I did enjoy it. It wasn't one of her best works for me, mainly because it kind of left a lot of plot points hanging. There is a woman that we never hear from again once we leave Bath, for example. But I did enjoy it, and I definitely recommend picking it up if you enjoy a good comedy set in the Elizabethan times. I've moved. Where have I moved to? Why is the bookshelf not here? It's magic, I'm telling you. So the kind of like next book I want to talk about is Hövdings Bägare. This is a Swedish middle grade book about a Viking called Halfdan who is crippled in an accident and all of the adventures and mischief he gets up to. This series was recently turned into a movie. It's obviously for kids, but I still want to watch it. So I wanted to read a couple of the books first, probably the first 5 or 6, before I watch the movie, so I know what's going on, because while my reading Swedish is really good now, my listening Swedish is not so good. But yes, I really enjoyed this. I gave it a 4 stars, I think. I did. I gave this a 4 stars. And look, it is my pick for different and it is my pick for Care of Magical Creatures, because it has a land creature on the cover, which is 2 horses. The next exam was Charms. Now I was planning on reading one of my NetGalley books for Charms, but unfortunately that book was not very good. I got 10% of the way through it. There were 6 women in total that the reader was introduced to, all of which were used or referenced as sex objects, at which point I was like, maybe I'll pick it up next month, maybe, just to warn other people off it. But instead of reading that one, I read Rogue Lawyer. Now I read this as a physical copy. It was one I borrowed from my dad. This calls itself a thriller, but it wasn't very thrilling. It covers a detective who is kind of like willing to fight below and above the rules, like pretend the rules don't exist in order to help his clients if he truly believes they are innocent. Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes he uses those tactics even when he knows that his clients are not innocent. It talks a lot in this book about the law and the misuse of the law to punish innocent people, which is really good, but there wasn't really an overarching plot. It was essentially 3 shorter stories that didn't really have a satisfying conclusion. There was no character growth. It was just this dude kind of bumbling around, you know, solving cases or whatever. Yeah, I didn't really like this book. I gave it, I think, a 2 stars, possibly a 3. The writing was really good. This guy is known, I think it's John Grisham, is known for being a thriller writer and has written an absolute ton of books. So obviously his writing is really good, and the writing style is very easy to read and easy to follow and sucks you into the world. But unfortunately, because the book didn't go anywhere, it was sucking me into a world which was kind of a boring one. But still, that's my charms past. Then we have Defense Against the Dark Arts. I wanted to read To Ride Hell's Chasm, which I did. This is also for my tome topple, for the tome topple challenge, as it's around 700 pages. I think it's 690 something. This book was so bad. Okay, that was a bit harsh. But Jenny Wirtz is an experienced fantasy author, and I would have expected her to be a much better writer. Unfortunately, the writing in this is very flowery and very not to the point. You can watch my reading vlogs for my up-to-date reactions on that. And also the main character is a bit of a Mary Sue. He is strong, he is powerful, he is injured, but you know, that doesn't stop him living his life. And do you see that eye roll right there is how I felt about this book. So I did finish it. I finished 700 words, but then I started to worry as we got to the end of the book. As we got to the end of the hours, I worried that maybe 2 wasn't considered an inconsequential enough word. So although I had read these 700 pages of absolute nonsense, I then had to read another book. So I also read for my Defense Against the Dark Arts, Rebel of the Sands. This book was much better. It was much shorter. This follows so I should probably say what this one was about first. This follows an older man who has been a mercenary and has recently won a position as the guard captain for a certain peaceful city. And suddenly a sorcerer's mark is found on a cupboard and the princess is missing, and they get him to kind of look into what is happening and keep the princess safe. You don't know who to trust in this world because there are demons that can take over the bodies and skins of people, and it's all sorts of chaos that goes on in this book. Unfortunately, chaosy. So yeah, I think I gave this 2 stars. I may have given it 1 star. This book is about a girl in sort of like I don't know where they are. They're in a desert, and it's a very Arabian feel to it, but it might not be from that area of the world. It's a fantasy anyway, but a very Arabian themed or Arabic inspired fantasy. It features a young woman whose uncle is attempting to marry her, and she doesn't seem to have any parents. She is trying to make money in a shooting competition, pretending to be a boy in order to escape her town. It kind of all goes downhill from there, and each one of her escape plans gets wilder and wilder until eventually she does escape. And while she's escaping, she meets and becomes friends with this young man who seems to have some very dangerous ideas of fun. This book was really well written, especially for a debut. I felt like the conclusion was really good, and it still left us on the edge of our seats for more. And yeah, I just really enjoyed this. I think the author is a good writer. She is a good fantasy author. There were some bits of it that kind of me scratching my head. Overall, I thought this was a decent book, and I think I gave it 3 stars. Then we had Herbology. Herbology, you need to read a book with a plant on the cover. I read The Bells. I didn't enjoy this book. I know it gets a lot of hype. I thought it was more of a 2, maybe a 3 stars at a stretch. I thought the writing was really good, don't get me wrong, and the world building was very interesting and apt for modern times, but I thought that the plot itself really struggled. The main character does a lot of questionable things that aren't really explained. It didn't really feel like any of her sisters had a personality of sorts, and I'm going to do another video dedicated to this book and what would have, reading it as an editor or as a constructive criticism, if this was sent to me as a critique partner manuscript, what I would say would bump it up from a 2 to a 4 stars, because I'm interested to hear if anyone else agrees with me that my changes would have made it better, or if they would actually have made it worse. But this book is about a young woman and her sisters, all of whom can change people's physical bodies to make them more beautiful, or taller, or shorter, or have a different nose, or different hair. These procedures are medical procedures, and they are incredibly painful, and the girls have something called a rose tea that numbs the pain. However, the monarchy seem to have a very odd control over the girls, and and because it is all in flux with a kind of evil or sadistic princess who is in charge of the girls sometimes, the main character has to do some things that she finds questionable and is forced to the very brinks of her power. And that's really it. There is a conspiracy, I guess, but it is very, yeah. Yeah, I'll talk about this in a separate video so we can actually like have a discussion more about the bells, because this video is going to be long enough already. And the next book I read was Potions. This was to read the next in a series, and I read The Defiant Heir, which is the sequel to The Tethered Mage by Melissa Caruso. I love Melissa Caruso. I talk to her a lot on Twitter, or rather I talk at her, I guess. I reply to a lot of her tweets on Twitter. She has created a fantasy world where there is kind of lots of different countries as part of this empire, and they have decided that people born with magic powers should be they're kind of in servitude in the sense that they are part of the army, but they are not allowed a choice. They have to be part of the army. In the first book, our main character, who is a scholar and is the daughter of one of the most powerful women in the empire, accidentally ensnares a falcon and becomes a falconer. A falcon is the name for these magically powerful women and men, and she's not allowed to be a falcon because she is part of a very illustrious family. Deuteronomist, that's the word, which means the secondary main character, as opposed to the protagonist, the deuteragonist. Yeah, that's a word. I learned that one. What's it saying? Yes, so we get a lot of both of them in the first book, and their adventures continue in the second book when they are trying to figure out whether war is about to kick off on the boundaries of one of their lands, and certain falcons start turning up dead. This was a really good read. It wasn't as good as The Tethered Mage, which I gave 5 stars. I think I would give this 3.5 or 4 stars. I really enjoy Melissa Caruso's writing style and political threats and plots, or throts, that kind of cascade through her work. I thought this was a really well written book, but it wasn't the best thing I've ever seen. However, it did manage to avoid the sort of like second book is a horrific mess, which a lot of new writers fall into. However, it did feel as though this book could have done with a lot more of a plot structure and a few more stakes. I did find the ending was very satisfying and also left me very excited for the next book, The Unbowed Empire, which came out last month, and I plan on getting around to it as soon as the bingo balls allow me out of their clutches. I hope you guys had an absolutely amazing reading month. Let me know if you read any of these books as well and what you thought of them, and if my descriptions match up in any way to reality. And I will see you guys shortly in my next video. Don't forget to hit like if you liked, and subscribe if you want to subscribe. And if you want to read anything I've written, I write very short stories on Twitter occasionally, so you need to follow my Twitter, which is linked down below. Also, I passed all my ALs, which means I can do any career I want, which is going to be a librarian.